good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arise with me, Sally Goodwin. Good to see you all this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arise. It is 7 minutes past 7. Sorry, a few minutes late. 7 minutes past 7 on the 10th of March. 2023 and the 17th of Adar 5783, very auspicious times and dates in the history of the world. Welcome everybody to Arise with Sally Goodwin. It's so good to see you this morning. I'm just getting myself all sorted out here and ready for this morning. Good morning, everybody. As you can see from my situation, I'm trying a slightly different angle on this morning's live. A slightly different space. Good morning, beautiful Bridget. Lovely to see you this morning. I hope things are well in Harrismith, my friend. Good morning, Evelyn. Morning, my lovely friend. I hope things are well in Kenya. And yes, Harrismith in Kenya, welcome this morning. I hope things are well with both of you. It is so good to see you. Sincere apologies for the lack of live. Good morning, beautiful Bertha. Lovely to see you, my friend. Sincere apologies for the lack of the live on Wednesday, but so good morning, Candace. Lovely to see you, my friend. We are blessed where we stay. If we have load shedding, we have like a little backup thing that means that the Wi-Fi stays on. So I can go live with the Wi-Fi. That remains on. But good morning, Jen, my lovely Jen friend. Good morning, Venetia. Lovely to see you. It's just like seeing all my besties in the morning when you all come on. It's such a privilege, honestly. I never get tired of it. I never get tired of it. So I can go live because I have Wi-Fi, but if it's dark, so obviously we in Cape Town are heading in South Africa, are heading into winter. And so if it is dark and I am going in, I can't put any lights on because there is no light because it's load shedding, then you won't be able to see me. You may be able to hear me. Good morning, Jen. Good morning, my friend, my gorgeous Jen friend, who is about to birth a beautiful baby. Maybe not about to, but she is pregnant with a beautiful baby. Her second beautiful baby. Two lovely ladies who always join my lives, Jenny and Jessie, are both about to have babies. I think Jessie is more about to have her baby than Jenny, but they're both about to have babies. It is a birthing season, ladies. Can I just say that? It is a birthing season. Good morning, Nolitando. Lovely to see you this morning. So good to have you on this morning. Wonderful. And yes, thank you. Please like and share if these words register. Oh, only in August. Okay, so not about to, but in August. It's coming. It's coming. Jessie's literally about to. She's 7 months, I think. So she's about to. Jenny's a little bit behind her, but coming in August. Wonderful. So it is still a birthing season. Very much a birthing season. Season of destiny and a birthing season. So, ladies, just as I was saying, apologies for the lack of live on Wednesday. I am possibly with the load shedding, which we know isn't going anywhere right now. I might just need to have a look at what time I do my lives. Because as I say, you can hear me, you'd be able to hear me, but you won't be able to see me. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's just, yeah, without light, you know, and obviously getting up in the morning and setting myself up and everything in the dark could be challenging. So I'm just going to have to see how it goes and possibly do my lives at 8 instead of 7, you know, when it's a bit lighter. But I think we'll play it by ear. I don't feel the need to commit one way or the other right now. I think we'll just play it by ear, and possibly we'll just see. I'll try and just plan it, you know, sort of look at the schedule the day before, and then maybe just put a notification on my Facebook page to say whether I'm going to go live at the normal time the next morning or the next. Okay, so LED lights that you can charge, bright enough, like sort of that it would light up like normal lights, Bridget. I'll have a look at that. Good morning, Renee. Lovely to see you, my friend. I'll have a look at that, Bridget. Some LED lights. Okay. I know we have some bulbs that fit into like our lamps that charge, and then, you know, when the lights go out, we can still put lamps on, but they're not very bright. They provide light, but not like a lot of light. But I'll look into some LED lights and see what works. Yeah. Because 7 does work. It just, you know, it's just a lot of people can come on at 7 because the day, you know, it's before their day begins, which is nice. So the mag lights. Okay, well, you ladies are all clearly just really up on load shedding survival. Clearly more than me. So Magneto. Okay. All right. Well, possibly the ladies who have solutions to this problem can just message me, WhatsApp me, maybe just a picture or a brand or something that I can look at, so that I'm not looking blindly. So yeah. Good morning. So okay, interesting shadows, because now the sun is rising and there's an interesting shadow there. This is all just experimentation. My whole existence right now feels like one big experiment. Anyway, ladies, good morning, good morning, good morning. It is so good to have you all here on this beautiful Friday morning. And you know that we celebrated at the beginning of the week, Monday and Tuesday. Just excuse the weird shadows. They're going to be there because I can't move around right now. So you know that at the beginning of the week we celebrated Purim. The Jewish people celebrated the Feast of Esther and Purim, and where they celebrate the deliverance of the Jewish people by Esther, obviously by the hand of God using Esther. And we spoke last week just about how we spoke from the book of Esther and just about how Esther stepped into her destiny and how God aligned and positioned Esther through basically trafficking and exploitation to fulfill her destiny, and how even with Jesus, how God aligned Jesus through persecution and crucifixion actually to fulfill his destiny, and how sometimes we don't realize that the very problems that we are facing and the very things that we are walking through that we actually do not enjoy are the things that are aligning and positioning us for the destiny that God has called us to. So that is just, you know, we spoke about that the last time we met, and God has really just been, he's just been constantly, good morning Tanya, lovely to see you. He's just been constantly speaking to me about this destiny season, and how it feels as though he's just on this word on destiny. And you know, destiny can sound like such a sort of a new agey word, and I think sometimes we hear words like that and we're just like, oh, you know, that sounds all too, you know, everybody has this ultimate kind of destiny or this ultimate sort of purpose, and it just sounds all too weird for us. Just hang on 1 second. I'm not loving this shadow. I just want to see if I can do something about it. Hold on a second. Let me just see if I can move this. Sorry, ladies, but this is all a work in progress, as you know. And you are all just part of my work in progress. Is that better? That does look a bit better, hey? It's this other light that I've got that I'm using. I don't think I can move it any further without actually just turn it away a little bit. Okay, that's better. That would have irritated me the whole entire time. Okay, better, right. So, yes, where was I? Destiny. So it just feels as though, and we've spoken so often about the prophetic significance of the Hebrew calendar, and how God is not bound by the calendar, and yet He often chooses to operate within the prophetic times, sort of the Hebrew calendar, because that's what He laid down, and how He calls us to pay attention to the prophetic significance of the Hebrew calendar. And so we pay attention to the month of Adar because it is the month of Esther. And we pay attention also because it is the 11th month of the biblical year. No, it is the 12th month of the biblical year. So we are moving over at the end of the month of Adar. We move into the month of Nisan, which is the first month of the new biblical year. And so as we move over, we obviously want to be stepping in to our destiny. We want to be, and I don't know that, and this is a personal opinion. This is just something that I sense. You can disagree with me with absolute pleasure, but I don't know that destiny is this. You can call it purpose, you can call it calling, you can call it other words that you might feel more comfortable with if destiny isn't a word that you really enjoy. But I don't know that destiny is this, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that we kind of aim for, and then one day we get there and then we kind of have made it. I feel that it's more something that we move towards in our life, and then even when we step into it, we go deeper and deeper into it. God calls us, to a purpose, and then we step into that purpose, and then that purpose, God expands it and enlarges it, and He shifts it, and He shapes it, and He changes it, and He moves it and guides it. And as we grow, and as we stretch, and as our character develops, and as we learn, and as we deepen our relationship in Him, and as we develop as people and develop our relationship with Him, then our purpose and our calling and our destiny also shifts and grows. And so I don't know that it's some kind of magical touchstone that you sort of reach this point and then you there. I think that we walk this road with God into eternity, and we move into the space, into eternity. And so it's not, I think we can have sometimes slightly skewed vision or slightly skewed ways of the way that we see destiny. But anyway, but this is a season of that. And so when we speak about Esther, and we pay attention to the way that she we read those verses in Esther, and we just paid attention to the way Mordecai said to her, and also just to pay attention to just that whole story. Mordecai and Esther would have been just two Jewish people who lived out their lives in the land of Persia, and didn't do anything particularly extraordinary or noticeable or notable or wonderful or anything. If Haman hadn't come along and decided that he wanted to destroy the Jewish people, and possibly both Mordecai and Esther would have been quite comfortable with that. They would have been quite happy to be two Jewish people who just lived very peaceful, very normal, very ordinary lives. But and this might be true for you, there are those of us that God, He plants this seed inside of us, and we know, and I believe it's inside of most of us. I think that life squashes it down often. Life happens to us and it squashes it down. But if you sit with God and you look deep inside yourself, you find it there. There is this seed that God plants inside our hearts that is like you know that you were born to make a difference. You know that you were born to do something for Jesus. You know that you were born to change something. You know that you were born to bring something to the earth. You know that you weren't just born to live a normal, ordinary life, to get up every day and go to work and come home and go to sleep and get up the next day and repeat that same day, day in and day out, from until the day you draw your last breath. Like, there is something inside those of us who burn for Jesus where we know that that is not what we were born for. And for some of us, the only way that we get to step into a destiny or a purpose or a calling that is extraordinary is when people or situations or circumstances like Haman come along and propel us out of our normal, comfortable lives into a life where we are forced almost to step into the extraordinary and to step into what God has called us to. If Haman hadn't come along and encountered Mordecai the way he did and done the things he did, Mordecai and Esther they would never have been in history. They would never have been in biblical history, because they would never have been required to step up and do what they did. And so if you have this thing inside of you that you know that you are called to do something in this world for God, that you are called to make a difference in this world, then don't be surprised when a situation or a circumstance or a person like Haman comes along and pushes you to a point where you are forced to stand up and do something, because that you are just doing what you are called to. You are stepping into your purpose and your calling. But we sometimes have this idea that yes, we are called to something, and that it's going to be this sort of and we're just going to, I don't know, float into this space, and kind of do this thing. And I don't know that I know of anybody whose purpose and calling worked out like that. If you know of somebody whose purpose and calling worked out like that, then feel free to point that person in my direction. I'd love to hear that story. But I don't think that happened for anybody. The people I know who made enormous changes in the world walked through fire and suffering and tribulation, and they were often thrust into circumstances beyond their control, beyond their, that they didn't ask for or choose, but they were thrust into these situations and circumstances. And instead of being, oh, woe is me, what am I going to do? They were like, okay, Jesus, what are we going to do? What am I, so sometimes it's the Hamans of the world that God uses to align us and position us for what he has called us to. And for those of us, for those of you, because there are many of you who watch these teachings, who listen to these words from the Lord, who are called to greatness within the kingdom of God. There are many of you who there is a Haman, a situation, a circumstance that is coming into your life, or coming, and what you need to be doing is understanding that this situation, this circumstance, this opposition, this person, God is using them to align you and position you for greatness. He is using this to align you and position you for greatness. I want to digress from the story of Esther briefly to the story of Moses. And I know it seems like an enormous digression, but you'll understand where I'm going with this. On a Saturday morning, I teach at a Bible school in Khayelitsha. Just possibly one of the most rewarding things I do. I love it. Oh my goodness, I love those people. Khayelitsha has my heart. I don't say that lightly. I do not say that lightly. There is something about that place and those people, and I love it there. Love it. Love it. And there's this amazing Bible school that these incredible friends of mine run right in the middle of Khayelitsha every Saturday morning. And it's pastors and ministry leaders who come to this Bible school. Pastors and ministry leaders who are so hungry for God, so hungry for Jesus, so hungry to learn more, so hungry to encounter Jesus more, so hungry to just, to just be at the feet of Jesus and just be fed more and receive more, because they give out so much and they just need to receive. And so I teach there on a Saturday morning. It's various modules. There are a whole lot of us who teach there, and we all teach different modules, and I'm teaching there at the moment. And the module that I'm teaching on right now, I teach the Old Testament, and I teach hearing God's voice. So at the moment I'm teaching hearing God's voice, and then I'll move on to teaching the Old Testament, which is just my best. But at the moment I'm teaching hearing God's voice. And so there are various scriptures, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing right now. But the one scripture, the one story that I refer to is the story of Moses in Exodus 3, verse 2-4, when Moses goes to the when he's walking through the desert, and he encounters the burning bush. And in the Amplified translation, in Exodus chapter 3, it says that in Exodus chapter 3 verse 2, it says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him, to Moses, in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, yet was not consumed. So I want you to picture the scene. Okay, so Moses is walking through the desert with the sheep, something that he does on a regular occasion. Okay, and he sees this burning bush, and the bush is burning. But what he sees about it, what kind of connects with him about it, is that it is not being consumed by the fire. So the bush is burning, but it is not burning up. It's just burning, isn't burning up. But verse 3, Exodus chapter 3, verse 3, I need you to pay attention to this. It says, and Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. Okay, so what happened? Moses saw the bush was burning, registered that it was burning but not being consumed, and then he turned aside to see. And then in verse 4, and when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him. I want you to pay attention to the fact that it wasn't enough that Moses saw the burning bush. It wasn't enough that Moses recognized that the bush was burning and yet not being consumed by fire. It wasn't until Moses turned aside and gave the burning bush his full attention that God spoke to him. It was only when God saw that Moses had turned aside and that God had Moses' full attention that God spoke to him. And as I was teaching this to the students in Khayelitsha on Saturday morning, the Holy Spirit dropped into my spirit that Moses could have turned his head, looked at the burning bush, thought, oh my goodness, there is a burning bush that is burning and not being consumed. He could have walked right past the burning bush and he would have missed his destiny. Literally. Can we just pause? Can we just pause and reflect on that for a moment? In worship, on Saturday morning, in worship, we're standing in this little church, tiny little church. It's wood and corrugated iron. And I'm standing there worshiping, and God says to me, Sally, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. Take off my shoes, and I'm standing on holy ground. And then as I'm teaching, and I'm explaining to these amazing people the different ways that God speaks to us. It's like God downloads this revelation of the fact that if Moses had kept walking past the burning bush, he would have missed his destiny. And God said to me, Sally, so many of my people hear my voice. They hear me speaking. They see the bush burning, but they don't take the time to turn aside, to stop, to turn aside and ask me or wait for me to explain what I'm trying to tell them. And they miss it. And you know, look, God is gracious. God is merciful. His mercies are new every morning. We know all of that. That's not to say that if Moses had missed it, that God wouldn't have given him another chance. You know, that's not to say that if he'd walked past the burning bush, he would have encountered, you know, a flaming tree, or, you know, an angel with a flaming sword, you know, like Joshua did, or, you know, that he would, that God wouldn't have met him somewhere else. There's a chance that God would have found him somewhere again. There's also a chance that God would have raised up somebody else. Like Mordecai said to Esther. Mordecai said to Esther, if you do not stand up, God will raise up another deliverer for the Jewish people. What did Mordecai say to Esther? If you do not step up now, you will miss it. You will miss your destiny, and God will use somebody else. Those were his words to her, to Esther. If you do not do this now, you will miss it. Ladies and gentlemen, I just feel like we are in this season, this intense season of the birthing of callings and destinies, and where there are so many of you who feel the stirring inside of you, the stirring to move places, to change jobs, to begin things, and there's the stirring, and you are, you know, you wanting to leave the familiar things and move into uncomfortable territories, and there's, you know, and you questioning and you wondering, and what I would like to say to you is stop. Turn aside. Hear from the Lord. Don't not do what God is calling you. Do not, if you are in the midst of being radically obedient to what God has called you to do not go back to God and say, Sally told me to stop being obedient. That is not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying. We are in a season of radical obedience. What I am saying is that in the season of radical obedience, in the season of appointed times, in the season of convergence, in the season of God sovereignly moving and bringing his kairos time and just destiny moments appearing, just the opening of doors, be sure that when you see the burning bush, you take the time to turn aside and hear the voice of God. You don't walk past and be like, oh, okay, there's another burning bush. You don't say, I know I'm hearing God, but I don't know what he's saying. You take the time to turn aside and hear the voice of God. Don't walk on by. Don't walk on by. What Moses heard when he stopped wasn't what he wanted to hear. He stopped. He turned aside. When God saw that he had turned aside, God spoke to him out of the burning bush. He said, Moses, Moses, and Moses said, here am I. God told him to take his shoes off because he was standing on holy ground, and that's what Moses did. And then God spoke to him about the Israelites, and God called him, and Moses didn't want to go. Moses didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear the call. He didn't want that to be his destiny. He didn't want to do what God was calling him to do. And there are some of us who we think God isn't speaking to us. And it's not that God isn't speaking to us. It's just that we don't want to hear what he's saying. God is speaking to us, all of us, all the time, loudly and clearly. We don't want to hear what he's saying, because what he's calling us to is not what we want. It's too uncomfortable. It's too difficult. It will require too much sacrifice. It will require too much surrender. It will require too much giving up of what is comfortable and what is known and what is easy. It will require risking the questions and the opinions of friends and family. Sometimes the things that God calls us to do, they make us question our own faith, our own ability to hear God. Some of the things that God has called my husband and I to do, the decisions that we've made, that, to be honest with you, in the natural world just don't make any sense. And there are times when I have sat and wept before the Lord and said to him, did we miss it? Did we miss you? Did we hear incorrectly? Did we do something wrong? But as I took those students through the first part of hearing God's voice, and we just looked at just a handful, because you can't go through every reference to hearing God's voice in the Bible, you'll be there forever. We just went through a handful of the people who God spoke to in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And we just looked at how many of them didn't feel ready, didn't feel that they had what it took, didn't feel that they were the right person, didn't feel that they had the skills or the qualification or the know-how, didn't feel, that they, that they thought God had chosen incorrectly. They thought, that is standard. And then they stepped into what God had called them to, and they basically sacrificed everything. They sacrificed everything. If we go back to the story of Esther, and we just look at, firstly, as I say to you over and over and over again, and I know that I'm sure you get tired of hearing me say this, but it's just it's so necessary to remember this. We need to remember that Esther did not know the end of the story. Esther did not know that when she stood before the king, he was going to receive her. She did not know that he wasn't going to just, have her killed. She did not know that. She did not know any of that. So we forget sometimes, because we know the whole story and we've heard it told a million times, that we forget that the people who lived that story didn't know how it would end. And that when Esther said, I perish, if I perish, I perish, that was she wasn't just being dramatic. You know, she wasn't just being like, you know, it wasn't for the sake of the story that she was saying that. And she then, you know, went to the king, and she had to get, you know, him and Haman together for this feast. And, you know, and then she didn't do it just once, she did it twice, in fact. And then she brought this whole thing to the king's attention of how he was, you know, doing this whole thing against the Jewish people and wanting to wipe them out. And, you know, and even after all of that, even after she put herself at risk with all of that, the king still couldn't reverse his decree. If you read the book of Esther, the king still couldn't reverse his decree. Such was a king's decree in Persia at the time that he couldn't reverse that decree. That decree went forth. It was irreversible. The only thing he could do was tell the Jewish people that they could defend themselves. So he sent out another decree saying that the Jewish people were able to defend themselves against whoever rose up to attack them. So it wasn't all like cut and dried. Oh, okay, well, there we go. It's all sorted. Like, off we go. You know, everything's going to be all fine. And that wasn't it at all. Sorry. It's need to get that fan that one of my beautiful friends was talking about. So, you know, so he doesn't, it wasn't just all sorted. It wasn't just all, you know, taken care of. But the Jews, it says in Esther chapter 8, verse 16, that the Jews had light, a dawn of new hope, and gladness and joy and honor. And so they were able to defend themselves against their enemies, which they did. And they actually defended themselves greatly, and they managed to do really, really well out of being able to defend themselves. And obviously the whole thing was, you know, everything worked out fine, and it was all good, and Mordecai was elevated, and everything was good. I want you to just pay attention to this one fact, though. The Jews were saved. Esther was the deliverer of her people. Mordecai became second in command to King Xerxes. The Jewish people were safe. Israel was once again saved. God had raised up a deliverer. Amazing. A foreshadowing of what Jesus would do for the whole entire world one day. Just amazing. I want you to just pay attention to this one fact. Esther didn't die. Esther's words were, "If I perish, I perish." Esther didn't die, but she did sacrifice her life. She didn't die, but she did sacrifice her life. The story ends in Esther chapter 10 that tells us about King Xerxes laying a tribute on the land and the coastlands of the sea, and it talks about the acts of his power and his might and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, and that they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. And Mordecai the Jew was next to King Ahasuerus and great among the Jews, and was a favorite with the multitude of his brethren, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to his whole race. Amazing, amazing, really amazing. And that would have been like that until the Persians were vanquished by Babylon. I think the Babylonians took over the Persians, but that's neither here nor there. What I'm trying to say to you is Esther could never leave. She could never not be queen. She could never have a normal life. We don't know what happened to Esther after that. We don't know what Xerxes was like as a husband. I think in our minds, we like to think of it as this wonderful love story, that Esther and Xerxes fell madly in love, and he was a wonderful husband, and she had children, and, you know, they played in the gardens and had a beautiful... I don't know that that's what it looked like. At the end of the day, Xerxes was a Persian king, and that is what he would have remained. He had a harem full of women. He was a man who, as we know from reading the book of Esther, who was probably, drank heavily. He was short-tempered. He liked to go to war. He was very power hungry. If you read in history books about him, he liked to go to war. He was arrogant and domineering, and he wanted to conquer everything in sight. So he would have spent large amounts of time at war with other nations. And eventually Persia as a nation fell. We don't know what Esther's life looked like after that. I'm sure that she lacked for nothing. I'm sure that she made a life for herself in the palace. I'm sure that, she had everything she wanted or needed, and she had Mordecai. She had Mordecai there with her. She had her only direct member of family, and she lived in the knowledge that she had delivered her people from certain death. She had prevented genocide, and absolutely, those things are amazing. But I want you to understand that I don't think her life was a walk in the park after that. She couldn't live a different life after that. And she would have been young, as we've said before, when she was taken to be the bride of Xerxes. However her life looked once that had all been done, it wouldn't have been the kind of life that she would have envisioned as a young child. So she might not have physically died, to save her people, but she sacrificed her life to save her people. She sacrificed her life. She literally laid her life down for her people. And you might see it as well. I mean, she lived in a palace, with servants and wealth and a crown. And remember that Xerxes was the king who wanted his first queen to dance naked before all his drunk friends at a banquet. Just this man, I think what we do sometimes with these stories is we romanticize them. We romanticize them. And when we romanticize them, I think we play down the sacrifice that people made. When we romanticize these stories, I think we reduce the sacrifice that was made, particularly by the women in these stories. I think we reduce the sacrifice that was made by the women in these stories, particularly. I don't think that King Xerxes turned into this tall, dark, handsome hero. I know it says in Esther that Xerxes loved Esther more than any of the others, and I'm sure that he did in his way. In whatever way that he loved, I'm sure he did. I don't know that love looked like the kind of love we think it should have been. I don't know that it was like a Song of Songs kind of a love. I don't know. And so I just think that we need to look at the gritty reality of the life that would have been lived by Esther. That yes, she might have lived in a palace as a queen with a king, but there is a very real possibility that it was more of a gilded cage. That it might have been a privileged existence, but it was a privileged existence that she could not escape from. Even if you were a concubine in Xerxes' harem, you could never leave, even if he never called you to his bed. Even if he never even knew you were there, you could never leave. You would never have children. You would never have a normal life. Esther may not have physically died, but she sacrificed her life to deliver her people. And I think that sometimes when we treat these stories, like the story of Esther, like this beauty pageant, love story kind of thing, we detract from the sacrifice that was made by a girl called Hadassah, actually. When we romanticize a story like Esther, we forget Hadassah and we focus on Esther. We obliterate Hadassah and we focus on Esther. And sometimes I think we don't want to remember Hadassah. We don't want to remember the beginning. We want to only focus on the end. And we want the end to be beautiful. And I'm not saying it wasn't, but I don't know that it was. Radical obedience, ladies and gentlemen. Radical obedience. Radical obedience can lead to sacrifice and surrender. No, radical obedience will lead to sacrifice and surrender. That is a lifelong habit. It's not that today I step into radical obedience and I sacrifice and surrender my life today. It is today I step into radical obedience because I don't want to miss my destiny in you, Jesus, but I am aware of the fact that I am sacrificing my life, that I may not physically perish like the believers in the Middle East, or the believers in the underground church in China, or the believers in any of those places. I may not physically perish, but I am sacrificing my life nonetheless. And I stand in solidarity and in recognition of women such as Hadassah, who became Esther. And I stand in solidarity and recognition of those women who maybe didn't physically perish, but nonetheless sacrificed their life to be deliverers of their people. I don't know who among you have watched the movie Harriet Tubman. I listen to, I have the Lectio 365, the app, Lectio 365. It's just a devotional app, and it's very ecumenical, but I love it. It's amazing. And my husband and I watched Harriet Tubman the other evening, and this morning they said that it's the anniversary of her death. She died today in 1913. If you haven't watched Harriet Tubman, sorry, watch that movie. That woman, she was a slave. I'm not going to tell you the whole movie. Go watch it. But she was a slave and she was freed. And she spent the rest of her life freeing slaves. And she didn't have to. She could have just lived in freedom. But she was determined that she wasn't going to enjoy freedom, knowing that there were still people who were in bondage. And that is for all of us. We don't get to enjoy freedom knowing that our sisters or our brothers are still in bondage. Watch that movie. She heard the voice of God. She walked with God in the most amazing ways. And at some point in time, somebody says to her, and I'm not quoting this word verbatim, so don't, when you watch the movie, but somebody says to her something about, God going with her. And she says to him, yes, God goes with me, but it's my legs that run. It's my, so what she's saying is that God is with her, but it's her body, that she puts on the line. It's her, she's the one who chooses to keep going back. And God is with her, and God, he works supernaturally, and you can see his hand, like just as she does these things, you can see God's hand like on her life and how he just averts disaster and just moves in her favor. Like and how she trusts him. She just blindly trusts him. I mean, it is just amazing. Like, she goes into these, the slave owners didn't know who this person was who was freeing all these slaves, and so they called this person Moses. So her code name, because nobody knew who she was Moses. I mean, just amazing. It's just amazing. Watch that movie, ladies and gentlemen. Harriet Tubman, you need to watch that movie. If you're worried about stepping into your destiny, Harriet Tubman, she was called Moses. She was an Esther for her people. She brought deliverance to her people. She sacrificed her life. She didn't die. She died. She lived through the whole experience, and she died of old age, I think, in 1913. But she sacrificed her life. It is a beautiful, beautiful movie. Ladies and gentlemen, now is not the time to shrink back. Now is not the time to wonder why God would use you. Now is not the time to question God as to whether you are the right person for him to use. Now is not the time to do any of those things. Now is the time to see the burning bush, to turn aside, to hear the voice of God, and to say, here I am, send me. Here I am, I sacrifice my life. Here I am, no matter what it looks like, no matter how hard it is, no matter how difficult it is, no matter whatever I need to lose, let me lose it. Whatever I need to be stripped of, let me be stripped of it. Whatever I need to get rid of, be it fear of man, be it fear of death, be it fear of anything, take it from me, Lord. Loosen it from me, whatever it is. Let me walk in freedom, and then let me go back and bring my brothers and sisters into freedom. Destiny awaits. Let us step in and bring freedom. Love you all, ladies, so much, with all my heart. Pray for you. I pray for you. Bless you. Have a super weekend, and I'll see you next week.